Okay. Hi, everybody. C.R. Barclay, Senior Missions Counselor for The Ohio State University here at Newark. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of having Dr. Elizabeth Weiser, Professor of English, joining me today. But we're going to do just something a little bit different. Rather than talking about the English classes and the English faculty of Ohio State Newark, we are going to dig down deep and talk to Dr. Weiser about her newest project. She's actually the author of a fantasy novel entitled Lumen. And Dr. Weiser, without any further ado, we're just going to get right down to it and find out, one, how long have you been on campus? And two, what gave you the idea for writing Lumen?
Hi, I've been here since 2004. And normally, I should say, in my normal day job, besides teaching, I also do, I research I study museums, and I look at things about the way that museums tell stories. And I guess for the novel, I mean, which is this is like what I do when I am sitting at home after work, right? And I'm sorry, I keep looking over. I'm looking at it. There it is. It's the novel. And it's a fantasy novel that takes place in a kind of alternative version of Turkey and the country. And my husband and I lived in Turkey in about 2000 when I had a Fulbright fellowship there. And so I wanted to capture some of the kind of feel of a place, because I think so many fantasy novels tend to it's like anything that's fantastic has to happen in England. And Harry Potter, obviously, but everything else, right? It's always like London is the only magical place. And I wanted to pick someplace else that I felt like was a really it was a wonderful experience. It was very interesting. And and then I wanted to kind of bend that into the setting for the novel. And then I would say that I don't know, the characters, who knows where characters come from? They just kind of started forming in my mind. And, I started to have little conversation. I knew that the two main characters were like these really best friends. And I wanted to show both, I wanted to show relationships that really mattered to people with that were not quite the same way that, I mean, one of the things that I've traveled a lot in my work, and I feel like we think of friendships and romantic relations, and we know, you act this way, and that's what you're doing. Yeah. And everybody does it slightly differently, right? And so I kind of wanted to get some of that sense. And then the actual plot was a lot of it seems like, I mean, there's so much in there where it's people are being targeted for they're being oppressed, essentially, because of who they are, and whether who they are is a dangerous shapeshifter, or a supposedly dangerous shapeshifter, or it's they're a person who is an immigrant, or they're African American or something. I mean, that's the same kind of sense, right? I wanted to. It's like people who are targeted for something. I wanted to kind of explore that, and then there are street protests, and there are people rising up against that, and it might feel like there's just things that happen in the novel that I think I watched the news and I'm like, wow, that's kind of like my novel there. But I didn't actually mean it exactly like that. I really just meant like here's our world. And now I'm going to turn it on its head, and then set it into this new place and change up relationships in different ways and send them on an adventure, which is really, I mean, it's kind of like they have to solve this mystery, and they do it with this, of course it's a novel, so like, oh, they're risking their lives, are they going to get through it, is everybody going to live, are they going to live happily ever after, all that kind of thing kind of comes in as well. But I think that I lived in Washington, D.C. for 10 years, so a lot of the kinds of citizen protest things that happen in the novel were based on experiences there, advocating for various things, and some of the, but then also just the lives of students. I mean, I feel like how do people live their lives here? We've had a lot of veterans come through the campus over the last, well, with the war and everything. I mean, many years, right? And I've learned so much from them. And so I made my two main basically my two main characters, veterans, and tried to capture some of that sense of like, what are they experiencing? How do they react to things? And that, and they're veterans of like this spellcasting corps of soldiers, which is a completely different kind of thing. That's the fantasy elements of it, but the experiences I think that I've just had over the years really played to me. Writing is, they always tell you write what you know. And obviously, in a fantasy novel, it's kind of like, well, you don't know that, but you kind of do. You sort of say, here's what I know, and now I'm gonna. It's fiction, right? So I'm going to fictionalize it in various ways, but I'm going to have a sense of what the emotional core is. Because if you don't, then your characters are just kind of like, they're like little pawns that you're like, I think I'll move you here now, instead of saying, what would you really do in this kind of a situation? I haven't lived that, but I can kind of imagine something, and how would a person like this react?
Okay, so then taking a track off of that, the next question would be, did it take you longer to flesh out and create the characters themselves than it was to actually write the entire novel? And how long did it actually take you from start to finish to write the novel?
That is a good question. It's funny because in a way I could say it took me 10 years, because I started it. I think I had the characters first, and I have a degree in creative writing, and so literary creative writing tends to be very character driven. And so coming up with characters, hearing their voices I mean, that sounds wrong, not really, but like hearing their voice in my head, how does that person talk? Little snippets of conversations, those kinds of things are a really good start. And so I'd have that before working out exactly the plot. I have to say the plot was probably harder than the characters. The characters just felt like, okay, here they are, and they keep being more and more rounded individuals for me. And then now what happens? And now what happens? And does that happen first? And how much do I describe it? And how much do I just kind of, how much detail do I go into with it? That kind of thing. So I started it. I stopped it completely. Actually, I started it right around the same time that I was finishing my first book, my first academic book. And instead, I finished my first academic book. And then I went ahead and did a couple other projects. And then I started writing a novel with a friend. I had been writing short stories before that, and started writing a novel with a friend. And I wasn't certain that I could write a novel. And but we did, but he thought we could. And so we went ahead and wrote this novel. And it's just kind of sitting there right now. I'm kind of thinking I'm going to go back to it and maybe, pull it out again now. But I think what it taught me was how to write a novel. And so then when I came back to Lumen, probably 2017, I think, maybe 2018. I'm not exactly certain. I know by 2018 I was writing it, but I might have, and I finished somewhere in there, and then, and so it took I would say it took about a year to finally get everything kind of down.
Yep.
And then it took me like 2 years of editing, because that, okay, there's stuff on a page, but it's not good yet. It's just stuff on a page. And that's a huge step. But then turning it from that into something good, it took more time. And I would, again, I was writing another book, in another scholarly book in the meantime. And of course I'm teaching classes and everything too. So it took a while. But probably kind of in a way 3 years all told.
Okay. So you kind of let the cat out of the bag a little bit. This is not your first venture into writing. You've written other academic books. So I know that our listeners would want to know, what is the difference between a novel, a work of fiction, versus a academic or an academically based type of work?
Yeah, you'd think it'd be huge, right? I mean, and if you look at it on the surface level, it really is. But I feel like coming to this project, as coming to anything I've written as a creative writer initially, I mean, and then I went on and I do have a PhD in rhetoric, just to, let people know. But having an MFA in creative writing and thinking about things as a creative writer, especially I would have to say, like, for my first book, researching, my first book involved, this is the really academic topic. It's the development of modern rhetorical theory during the Second World War. And I looked at I was in archives and I was looking at letters and I was looking at written texts, printed texts and drafts of things. And so, looking at all this kind of written evidence, talking about the development of modern rhetoric during the war. But as a creative writer, I was thinking of these people as not just like there's text on a page, but like this is this person sitting there reading this thing, thinking, I really disagree. And then writing this text that comes out, 3 months later, but it's clearly in response to this piece. So you could just picture him there, just, he's really furious and he's writing this thing. And then that person writes a letter back. And so now they're back and forth in these letters and they're real people. And so figuring out how to tell that story in a way, as a story, it's like, I mean, our lives are like stories, right? And so
Right.
Being able to narrate that in a way that isn't just like, here's the dry facts, but let me make it actually interesting, because their lives were interesting. And even in pieces that are less obviously kind of historical that way, my most recent book was about, again, museum rhetoric around the world. But the thing that really fascinated me is the way that we tell the stories of our different nations. And to think of each of those as kind of a story. Well, why are we telling the story? Why are we telling it this way? What characters get highlighted and who does not get highlighted? What events are really important to the story? What are just kind of like glossed over? All of those are elements of creative writing as well, because it's all narrative. And so I really feel like they tie back and forth to each other. And then the same thing with Lumen, then I think about a lot. I mean, it occurs to me another big influence on me is that I was initially an anthropology major in college. And so how do other cultures respond to things? In the book, they happen to, this weird little world that they're in, worships a goddess. So because goddess worship was a thing in Anatolia, 3,000 years ago or something, And I thought, okay, well, what if I just continued to do that? Well, people would have gardens because, it's an earth god. It's like the earth mother, like that. Well, it isn't just like a thing. They'd have gardens everywhere. There wouldn't be like these, and their public squares would be kind of, plus they're shapeshifters. They transform into animals. Their public squares are not big pieces of concrete. They'd have like grass and things because some of these people are turning into, horses that go out and have a snack or something. When they think of the afterlife, they think of it as being underground, like the equivalent of heaven would be underground to them because they're going into the body of the earth mother. And I thought that seems all totally normal, totally rational to me, kind of a reasonable thing to think about if that's the culture. And so, the academic anthropology that I learned in college played into that, as it played into my ability to think about things like that. So it all kind of goes together.
Okay. So you bring to mind another question. So I'm willing to bet when you were a freshman or a sophomore as an anthropology major, you did not foresee yourself several years in the future being a full professor of English and writing both academic as well as creative novels. You didn't see that.
Nope.
So what was there a class that you took that turned you away from anthropology and got you interested in English? Because we tell our students every day, you know what? We know that sometimes you take classes and in your mind at that time, they may not mean anything, but you never know that it could be the class that sparks something in you that turns your whole life sideways, upside down into a completely different direction. Did that happen to you?
Wow, I wish I could at this point say yes, and it was an English class. But in fact, I took very few English classes in college. I loved anthropology. I would say that well, I went to college. Let me just say, so I did change. What did turn my life around was my first anthropology class because I went to college as a journalism major.
I love it.
I started in journalism. I loved my first journalism. I really loved the class. It was, something like Introduction to Journalism. And I also realized, okay, I'm looking at the major, I'm looking at this class, I'm realizing that it felt to me like I was going to do an awful lot of very, very specific, narrowly focused work. And I thought, gosh, I'm interested in everything. I actually said to a friend of mine, I don't know if this is the right major because I'm interested in everything. Now, honestly, today I would tell people if you're interested in everything, journalism is a great field. But I was stupid and I didn't know that. And she said to me, oh, if you're interested in everything, it sounds like you should go into anthropology. And I was like, what is that? I have no idea. And I took my first class and I thought, okay, this isn't the study of everything, but it is the study of humans and their culture. And that is fascinating to me. And I never knew that was fascinating. But I was one of those people in college who I have a minor in theology because I just happened to think I took, my first semester I was at a Catholic college and I took like Introduction to the New Testament. And I thought, whoa, this is really cool. I've heard this stuff all my life, but I didn't know this was going, these were actual letters written to actual people. Who were they? So I went on and took other classes. I took a class in Marxism. I took a class in existentialism. I took ethics and I don't remember what all. I took a bunch of French. I took Spanish. I just was like, you name it. And I was like, wow, that looks interesting. I'll take that class. And today I would do a lot more with sciences, but at the time I was like, they did not encourage that because I was a woman and they were like, oh, you want to stop doing that? You can just stop doing that. That's fine. Don't stop doing that if you're a woman today. But and so now I read science magazines for fun because I actually want to know more about science too. It's just, I just kind of always, I think more than that there was one class that turned me around. It was being open to the idea that whatever class I'm taking, I'm going to learn. I remember my statistics class as, okay, I actually also have a master's degree in education. And in my statistics class, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm taking statistics, but it was so fascinating and it's so helpful to me today. And I loved I realized, okay, if I stop thinking I have to take this class and I don't know if I can do this, and I start thinking, what are we learning here? This is really cool, actually. Then it was delightful. So I think that it's more than, I mean, yeah, sometimes you get totally turned around, but sometimes you no matter what you're taking, there's something that you can really get out of it that you just never experienced before.
Okay,
I think.
Based on what you're sharing, it sounds as though there's at least a portion of Lumen that is drawing upon every piece of your life experience, your life journey to
I even
this
have a
point.
teacher in there actually too, yeah.
So, okay, so then hedging our bets a little bit, let's ask you the question. In your professional life as a professor on campus, I know that you used to work with students to put together a series of short stories, maybe a novella or two into a
literary journal.
Thank you.
Yep, we did a literary journal for
So
6 years or so.
is there or will there be a club or an organization on the Newark campus that may be a budding writer, a journalism maybe that might want to get involved in, or rather than just coming to seek you out? Let's just put it that way.
There are, I mean, the way that we do clubs on the Newark campus is that they are student driven. So if you are interested in starting a club, and we've had creative writing clubs off and on over the years, people come in, they form the club, they write together. I think we've had several of our faculty who well, I mean, someone is the faculty person in charge of that. So I know David Ruderman has done it in the past for our campus. And I did it one year. And then, people write and then they move on to, they graduate or they go on to Columbus or whichever it happens to be. And the club kind of dies. But then 2 years later, people come back and they're like, hey, I wish there was a creative writing club. And we say, well, you can start a creative writing club. There's funds for that. And and someone in the faculty will, be the faculty sponsor. There's also at the writer studio where our tutors work. A lot of the tutors do creative writing, and oftentimes they'll kind of form. In fact, I think even last year I know there was a pretty strong creative writing group. They would get together and write. And then we have in the English program we offer creative writing classes, and we have actually. So you can just take a class. You can take one class. We offer classes in fiction, in creative nonfiction, and in poetry. And I think like next fall, I know right now we're offering poetry. I think next fall is fiction. I don't know what the spring is. I believe I'm doing creative nonfiction the following year or spring, who knows, sometime there. And we also offer a minor in creative writing if you here on our campus, so that if you're in any other field, but you really like to write, 5 classes, I think five classes in, various different genres. We don't expect you to be great. This is going to be, I hope you ask me what kind of advice I would give to budding writers, because I have advice. But we get you writing, and get you sharing your work with others. And then we also have, there is a whole, and then you can go full bore and become a creative writing major as well. And that's, you can do a good, if you started here, you could do half the classes here. You can do the final couple classes in Columbus. You can go to Columbus and do the whole thing. You know, and our creative writers at Ohio State in general are really excellent. They're like nationally known, at least, really big name people, and so it's a very good program. You can
Okay,
go on
so
and get a master's of fine arts in creative writing. You know, you can do as much as you want, basically, but you can certainly do, just like you can join a club. That would be like the very basic level.
okay, so pulling it back to Lumen, which I failed to say in my opening, is available on Amazon.com. With the writing process itself, do you think that with all of us being shut in basically for the past year, do you think that as a writer that helps, or or does it hurt, or does it really depend on the writer?
That's a good question.
Every once in a while, my wife says. So
I think there's two ways to answer that, because one is to say, I find personally, in these very stressful times, I have found creative writing to be so incredibly therapeutic. And I often describe the writing process as reading your favorite novel really, really, really slowly. And so you get to savor every word, and you get to say, not only do I love this sentence, but like, you know what if I changed that word in this sentence to be that? You know, and you just get lost in that world. And so in some ways, and I have found, I mean, I've written over the years Turkey is a good example. I went to Turkey with the idea that I'm going to spend a lot of time doing creative writing. But guess what? I lived in Turkey. You know, why would I be sitting in my room writing when I could be out exploring this fascinating country? So I did much less writing there than I do when I'm just, sitting, honestly, than when I'm sitting in Newark, Ohio, in my basement. Like right now, I can do a lot more writing. But on the other hand, a lot of times I get students who will tell me that they love to write, and they pretty much only are sitting in their basement writing. And I think it's really important to be able to get out and experience the world, so that you have something to write about. And it doesn't have to be, I have no experience whatsoever with spellcasting, but I can write about people in facing situations that they didn't know that they could deal with, because I can think of, like, okay, I'm trying to get a plane. I'm getting a plane from, I'm in the middle of a demonstration in Bangkok, and there's thousands of people around me, and I am kind of worried suddenly about what this is going to mean, but I can deal with that situation, or I'm catching a plane to this small town in Ethiopia, and they're telling me there's no flights back, but there might be a flight, but I can't tell until I get there. And do I say, oh, I'm not going to go? Or do I say, chances are there'll be a flight sometime, right? And it'll work out, that kind of thing. And if I was only sitting in my basement, I would never have those experiences. And so I couldn't incorporate that kind of thing into writing. And I also couldn't just, I don't think I would live as interesting a life. So I think that it's very helpful in terms of, we have fewer distractions right now.
you are correct there.
Yeah, but if you haven't done a lot of other things, then my advice is get out and live too.
Okay, so before I ask you the question that you want me to ask you about the advice, one last question about Lumen and about about characters. Did you either write or rewrite a situation, a scene, specifically because you have a great character and you're like, oh my God, I want them to do this. But in the
Ah,
first draft or the second draft of the book, your story is going in a completely different direction. Do you change the flow of the river so that you can have a character get into this situation so you can get them out? You can actually have a chance to write them
yeah.
out of that situation.
Yeah, I kind of joke sometime that my main character's name is Besh, and I feel like, and I love Besh, but I feel like that love is sort of it's the opposite of masochistic. It's anyway, whatever that word is, that means like I'm torturing him, right? It's sort of like, what situation can I put Besh in to make it painful and horrible to him, and then he has to deal with it, because I can picture scenes. I get like, okay, here's a conversation I want to have happen. What leads up to that conversation? Because I know that I want these two characters. I want Besh to say this. I want his friend to say that. I want this to then he's going to respond this way, and this is going to happen. And so, well, if they're going to have that conversation, what has to happen to get to that point? Or there's a moment in the book where one of the other main characters goes up there. Okay, so a tree gets spell cast and it's like it's on fire, right? And she goes up and she's like touching, and in the midst of all of this other mayhem that's going on, she's like she's stroking the bark of the tree, putting her hand through the fire and stroking the bark of the tree, and making the fire go out and the tree become whole. And I had that picture in my head of her doing that. And then I thought, okay, so what is happening? How does this entire chapter really happen? Just so that they happen to be by the tree, that the tree happens to catch fire. What happened for that thing to happen? Because I wanted that scene to be there. And I think that really speaks to the whole idea of there's writing and then there's editing and revising. And so often people write papers for class, right? It's the same kind of thing. It's like you write something and you're like, yeah, that I'm done. And I think that if you're going to actually write well, you have to just love revision and love and editing, not like grammar, but just love the process of like, there it is. I'm making it better. I'm making it even better. I'm coming back to it and I'm making it better again. And eventually you have to say, okay, now it's as good as I'm going to, maybe this is the very, very best thing in the entire world, but now I'm done. Right. But that like constant revision process is such a huge part of creative writing. It's one of the things that we really, really learn a lot in creative writing programs. I incorporate that into then my professional writing program here, and into everything that I write. It's like, okay, it's this academic piece and I think it's perfect. Oh, look, I wrote this article. Yay, isn't that a great article? No, I walk away from it and I come back to it and I'm like, no, I could say that so much better.
Yep. And I will say to our listeners, our watchers today, that anyone can write a C paper. You can roll out of bed and write a C paper. The difference between a C paper, a B paper, or an A paper is the rewrite.
Yep.
Is the rewrite. Because whether you are taking things out because you've said something more than once, 2 or 3 different ways, or you have found a better example.
You said it there.
Yeah, exactly. Or you found a better example.
Put them together.
Yeah. And I find that with incoming freshmen, that is the biggest adjustment that they have to learn to make. That coming from high school into a college setting, a full-time college setting, because we have a lot that do AP courses or that do College Credit Plus courses, but full-time college, learning how to rewrite, accepting the constructive criticism whether it is from your best friend that you let read it, or the professor that has decided that, you know what, you want to turn in a draft before the paper's actually due, yes, I will read it and
Yeah.
give you constructive criticism. Understanding that it's not personal, understanding that the professor wants to help you just as much as you want to help yourself get through this class with the best grade possible. But just keep in mind, anybody can write a C paper. First draft is probably a C paper. It's the second or the third draft. And as you said, Dr. Weiser, changing that word, combining sentences, combining thoughts, and making it from a good paper to a great paper.
Yeah, I mean, how often do I see people who will say in their paper, as I said before, I'm like, no, it's a 2-page paper. You know, if you said it before, put it together with where you're saying it now. For instance, it's like, don't even get me going on revision. But I think that the other thing is that the promise that we can make you is that as you're writing in college, you will write that C paper a lot faster. I mean, you do get better at writing papers. Part of what we try to do is I know in the English program is teach you like some of the essentially the tricks for like fast writing, right? So that you can say, okay, I know I need this and I need that and I need that, and I'm putting that together and I got that. So that, yeah, you got a paper fairly quickly. Then you have the rest of the time to do the revision that makes it actually better. Mm-hmm. So you might be taking less time to write initially, but then, you're leaving yourself the time to write well.
Exactly. Okay, so now, Dr. Weiser, I'm going to set you up for the question, for the answer that you want to give. For our final question today, and once again, Lumen is available on Amazon.com for any person that might be interested. And thank you very much, Dr. Weiser, for giving up your time.
My name is spelled Weiser too, by the way.
There you go.
Don't buy a flashlight. If you look up Lumen, you're going to get flashlights, but then you'll see the book. So,
if you were going to give a aspiring writer any advice, what would the 1 or 2 tips that you would offer to them be?
Okay, so the thing that everybody always says is, oh, I've wanted to write something. I want to write a book. I have these, I really wish I could find some time to write, or I want to do this. I'm just waiting for like inspiration. And the biggest piece of advice that we always tell people is do not wait to be inspired. It's like saying I'm going to only exercise when I'm like really, really in the mood to basically, then you don't do it. You just tell yourself, okay, hey, 30 minutes, I'm out there, I'm running, right? Whatever, I'm doing whatever I'm doing. And it's the same thing with writing. And if you tell yourself, and in fact, a lot of professional writers will tell you, how do they ever find time? They have some other job, they're like teaching or something, right? How do they find time to write this whole thing? And they give themselves 15 or 30 minutes a day. They write one screen. They do, all that kind of thing. It's you set whatever limit you can handle, and I say to myself 30 minutes a day. And so even right now, it's like I did that this morning. It was like, okay, so write for 30 minutes and then go on with the rest of your day. And do it every single day. And then the other piece of advice that follows from that is give yourself permission to write absolute garbage, so that you're not saying, I have to sit down and I'm going to write 30 minutes of good stuff. Instead, you're writing you're just writing whatever, right? Because some days this morning I did not feel like writing, and sometimes you can just edit then, and it's like, oh, I'm doing something, right? But I actually needed to write a scene today, and I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to say. I'm starting it. It's bad. And I started to erase, and I was like, no, just go on, just write stuff, right? Because then it's on the page, then you can look at it later on and fix it. But you get your time in, and you've got, one more page down out of, you do that for a year and you have a full novel. And then of course you revise it, for another year. But yeah, give yourself permission. Tell the editor on your shoulder to shut up and just give yourself permission to write garbage, but do it all the time. And don't wait for inspiration, because inspiration does not hit you when you're not actually practicing. It's like practicing the craft. So you have to practice the craft in order to get better. Obviously the other thing is, like, notice how people that you like are actually putting things together. How do they get from one scene to the next? How do they get their characters to speak? How do they describe things? How do they do, notice what they're doing when you have an author you like, and then do that too.
Hey, well, this seems like a great place to leave it. Once again, Dr. Weiser, thank you so much
This
for
was
giving
fun.
up
Thank
some
you.
of your time. I enjoyed the conversation. I learned a lot. And once again, Lumen, just released by Dr. Elizabeth Weiser, Professor of English at The Ohio State University at Newark, the book is available on Amazon.com for, like I said, for anyone that wants to read it. I am now going to go running over to my computer to hit the buttons to have it ordered to read, because I admit fantasy novels was not in my wheelhouse, even though I'm right next door. I'm literally next door because I'm a science fiction person. So anybody that can look behind me and that decides to zoom in can see that I am a pure Star Trek person.
Oh, I love Star Trek.
Love Star Trek. So I'm right next door. I mean, we're like
urban fantasy isn't like what is that thing? It's not Game of Thrones. Urban fantasy is like, it's a city and they're living a normal human life, except that every now and then these little things are happening. So just to say, but and besides, the other choice is that you look me up and pick up one of my academic books. And honestly, this is a much more enjoyable read than museum rhetoric, building civic identities in national spaces.
Point taken. So thank you again, Dr. Weiser. We appreciate your time. And
absolutely.
For our viewers, listeners, watchers, this was number one, or segment one of what I hope to be a 5-portion series on some of the interesting people and faculty members that we have here at The Ohio State University at Newark campus. So I hope you will tune in again. Thank you. Okay.